Flowers have been part of human civilization since the very beginning. We use them to express love, happiness, grief, mourning, basically every important human emotion. They are symbols of our feelings, isn't it? Beautiful objects with deep meaning. But from a biologist's point of view, flowers are something quite different. They are magnificent structures, morphologically brilliant and embryologically complex. They are the actual sites where sexual reproduction happens in plants. Angiosperms, the flowering plants, they show sexual reproduction. And what does this sexual reproduction produce? Fruits and seeds. The entire process is controlled and organized through the flower structure itself. Now, before we even see a flower, many things are happening inside the plant. Hormonal changes occur, structural changes occur. These lead to the differentiation of what we call the floral primordium, basically the initial structure that will become the flower. Then inflorescences form. These are clusters of flowers. You get floral buds and these develop into mature flowers. It's a sequential process, no? One thing leads to another in an organized manner. Inside each flower, you have two main reproductive organs. The androecium, which is the male reproductive part, a wall of stamens, and the gynoecium, which is the female reproductive part, the pistil, both present in the same flower structure. The stamen has two parts, basic structure. The filament, it's long and slender, basically a stalk. And then the anther at the top, this is the terminal structure. Simple, na? The filament is attached at the bottom part, the proximal end, to the thalamus or sometimes to the petal base. This gives support and positioning to the whole stamen. Now the anther. It is bilobed, meaning it has two lobes, and it is dithecous due bias to theca. So if you count new lobes times 2 theca per lobe, that's 4 theca in total. Clear? These theca, they contain microsporangia, 4 of them, positioned at the corners of the anther structure, 2 in each lobe. And these microsporangia, they contain the pollen grains that we'll talk about in detail. Let me describe the microsporangium structure to you. When you look at it under a microscope, it appears almost circular in outline. 4-sided structure, basically. Okay, so it has 4 wall layers. The outermost layer is the epidermis. This is protective, no? It gives structural support to the whole microsporangium. Then comes the endothecium. This layer is important. It helps in dehiscence. That means it helps the anther to open and release the pollen grains. Think of it like the mechanism that pops the pollen out. Then the middle layers. These provide extra protection. Multiple layers working together for protection. And the innermost layer, the tapetum. This is the nutritive layer. Very important. Its cells have dense cytoplasm and many cells are multinucleate. They have multiple nuclei. Why? Because they're working hard to feed the developing pollen grains. In the center, when the microsporangium is young, you have sporogenous tissue. It's a compact group of cells, homogeneous cells. These are the cells that will eventually become pollen grains through meiosis. Microsporogenesis. This is the key process. It's how microspores form from the microspore mother cell. And the method? Meiosis. Meiotic divisions, remember? Each cell in the sporogenous tissue can become what we call a microspore mother cell or PMC. It's potential pollen material, basically. Each one can divide meiotically. When meiosis happens, one PMC produces 4 microspores. These 4 stay together, initially in an arrangement called a tetrad. Think of it like 4 siblings staying together after birth. But then, as the anther develops and matures, water is removed, dehydration occurs. The microspores separate from each other. Each one develops into a mature pollen grain. They become individuals, no? The result? Thousands and thousands of pollen grains inside each microsporangium. And then when the anther opens, we call this dehiscence. All these pollen grains are released. Massive release it is. Pollen grains, these are the male gametophytes. Remember gametophytes? The structures that produce gametes. So pollen is male gametophyte. Pollen grains are usually spherical in shape. The size, 25 to 50 micrometers in diameter. Very small basically. You need a microscope to see them properly. The pollen grain has a 2-layered wall. 2 distinct layers, outer layer and inner layer. Each has different properties, different functions. The outer layer is called exine. It is made up of sporopollenin. Now listen to this. Sporopollenin is the most resistant organic material known. most resistant. It can handle extreme conditions. Sporopollenin can withstand high temperatures. It can handle strong acids. Strong alkalis? No problem. Enzymes trying to break it down? Fails. No known enzyme can degrade sporopollenin. Absolutely incredible material, isn't it? Now, the exene has special openings called germ pores. At these points, sporopollenin is actually absent. Why? Because this is where the pollen tube will come out, strategically absent basically. Inside, you have the intine. It is thin, continuous layer, made up of cellulose and pectin. These are flexible materials, unlike the hard sporopollenin. Inside the pollen, we have the cytoplasm, enclosed by a plasma membrane. Standard cellular structure, basically. Inside you have two cells. The vegetative cell, it's the larger one. It has abundant food reserves. Why? Because this pollen has to travel, has to function. It needs energy. The nucleus is large and irregular in shape. Then the generative cell, much smaller, spindle-shaped, dense cytoplasm. And here's the interesting part. It floats inside the vegetative cell's cytoplasm, literally suspended in there. Now, when does pollen get released? Over 60% of flowering plants, the majority they release pollen at this stage, two-celled stage. The generative cell hasn't divided yet. But in the remaining species, the generative cell divides before release. Mitotic division produces two male gametes. So pollen is released with 3 cells, 1 vegetative and 2 male gametes. But this happens before shedding, not after. Pollen grains, they have both negative and positive aspects. Negative, some pollen cause allergies. Carrot grass, Parthenium, its pollen can cause severe allergies, bronchial problems. Many people suffer from pollen allergies during certain seasons. Positive side, pollen is nutritious. Very nutritious actually. It's sold as food supplements. Pollen tablets, pollen syrups, people consume them for health benefits. Good energy source. Now about pollen viability. How long pollen can function? This varies. Rice pollen, wheat pollen, these are cereals. They lose viability in 30 minutes. Just 30 minutes. But pollen from some other families like Rosaceae or Leguminosae or Solanaceae, they can stay viable for months, much longer. Because of this variation, scientists preserve pollen. How? Liquid nitrogen. Negative 196 degrees. At this temperature, pollen can be stored for years and years. This is called a pollen bank. Important resource for breeding programs. The gynoecium or pistil. This is the female reproductive part, the counterpart to the male stamen. Now, pistils can come in different arrangements. Sometimes you have one pistil that's monocarpellary. Sometimes you have multiple pistils part, multicarpellary. And if multiple, they can be fused together, syncarpous or separate apocarpous. Variable structure based on the flower. But typically, each pistil has 3 parts. Stigma at the top, where pollen lands, style the middle, elongated part, and ovary, the base bulged part. 3 parts, 3 functions. Inside the ovary, there is a cavity. We call it the locule or ovarian cavity. This is where the placenta is situated. The placenta. It's a special tissue. And from the placenta, the ovules arise. Ovules are also called megasporangia. These contain the female reproductive cells. The ovule, also called megasporangium, this is the female reproductive structure. It's attached to the placenta by a stalk. The stalk connecting ovule to placenta is called funicle, and where the ovule meets the funicle, that junction point is called hilum. Simple connection structure. How many ovules are there? Varies. Some flowers have just 1 ovule per ovary, like wheat or mango. Others have many, like papaya or watermelon or orchids. All kinds of variation. The ovule is covered by protective layers called integuments. Usually 1 or 2 layers. They wrap around the inside structure, the nucellus, except at the top. At the top, there's an opening. This opening at the top, it's called the micropyle. Micro small, pyle opening. This is where the pollen tube enters during fertilization. Strategic opening basically. On the opposite end, the bottom end, there's a part called chalaza. This represents the basal part of the ovule. Inside the integuments, you have the nucellus. It's a tissue, a mass of cells, and importantly, it has abundant food reserves. This food will be used by the developing embryo later, and inside the nucellus, the embryo sac develops. This is the female gametophyte. Typically, one embryo sac per ovule, central location surrounded by nutritious nucellus tissue. Megasporogenesis. This is the process by which megaspores form. Similar concept to microsporogenesis, but for the female side. Meiotic divisions produce megaspores from the MMC. The MMC megaspore mother cell, the communication, that's near the micropyle region. That's near the micropyle at the top of the nucellus. The MMC has distinct characteristics. It's large, dense cytoplasm, lots of material packed in, and a prominent nucleus, clearly visible nucleus. Meiosis occurs. One MMC divides meiotically, produces 4 megaspores. 4 haploid spores, just like in microsporogenesis. But now here's the difference from pollen. Of these 4 megaspores, only one survives and functions. The other 3, they degenerate, disappear. Why? We don't know all the details, but this is the pattern. This pattern is called monosporic development. Mono 1, sporic, sipper. 1 spore, 1 gametophyte. This is the most common pattern in flowering plants. The functional megaspore nucleus now undergoes mitotic divisions. Key point. These are free nuclear divisions. That means nuclei divide but no cell walls form, nuclei floating freely in cytoplasm. First division produces 2 nuclei. These nuclei move to opposite poles of the embryo sac. 2 ends, 1 nucleus each. Second division, now you have 4 nuclei. 4 nuclei floating in the cytoplasm. Third division, 8 nuclei. 8 free nuclei, all floating together. This is a critical stage, important milestone in female gametophyte development. Then what happens? Cell walls form. Now the structure organizes. Nuclei get enclosed in cells. The free nuclear stage ends, cellular stage begins, and you get the organized embryo sac structure. The mature embryo sac, this is the final structure of the female gametophyte. 7 cells, 8 nuclei total. That's the standard structure, the most common pattern. We call this the polygonum type, named after a plant where this pattern was first well described. This is the most common type in flowering plants. Let's look at the structure. At the micropelar end, the top NAMs, you have the egg apparatus. 2 synergids, 1 egg cell. 3 cells at the top, but only 1 egg cell. The synergids, they are on the sides, and they have something special called filiform apparatus. Filiform means thread-like. These are structures at the micropilar tip that guide the pollen tube, like a landing guide basically. The egg cell, the central one. This is where the female gamete is. This is what will fuse with the male gamete during fertilization. Below the egg apparatus, you have the central cell, largest cell in the embryo sac, and inside 2 polar nuclei. Usually these polar nuclei fuse before fertilization, forming what we call the secondary nucleus. At the bottom end chilazole end, 3 cells called antipodals. Anti-opposite, podal foot. They are at the opposite end from the egg apparatus. Function? Still debated, but they're there. So total organization egg apparatus at top, central cell in middle, antipodals at bottom, 7 cells, 8 nuclei. This mature structure is ready for double fertilization. Pollination, simple definition. It's the transfer of pollen from the anther, where it's produced, to the stigma. That's the female part. Transfer across space, basically. Why is this necessary? Because gametes can't move. The male gametes are inside pollen, can't swim. The egg cell is in the ovule, stuck there. They need help to meet. That help is pollination. Plants use external agents. 2 types of abiotic agents, wind and water. 1 type of biotic agent, animals. Various animals serve as pollinators. Which is more common? Biotic pollination. Most plants use animals. More reliable, more targeted. Better success rate actually. But abiotic pollination, it's like chance game. Wind might blow pollen away completely, water might wash it away. So what do plants do? Produce enormous amounts of pollen, like millions, compensate for loss through massive production. Autogamy or self-pollination. Pollen stays on the same flower, doesn't go anywhere else. Self-fertilization? For this to work, certain conditions must be met. First, anthers and stigma must be close to each other. Second, timing must match. When pollen is released, the stigma must be ready to receive it. Both conditions necessary. Some plants produce what we call Cosmogamous flowers. These are normal flowers. You can see the anthers, see the stigma. They open normally. These flowers can undergo autogamy if conditions match. But same plant might also produce clistogamous flowers. Clisto means closed, gamous means sexual reproduction. These flowers never open, never expose their reproductive parts. Why produce closed flowers? Insurance, basically. In the closed environment, pollen falls on stigma automatically. Fertilization guaranteed. No need for pollinators. Ensures seed production even if no insects available. Examples: Violet voela produces both types. Oxalis does too. Commelina also. Same plant species, two flower strategies. Clever adaptation. Geitonogamy. This is different from autogamy. Not same flower, different flowers, but same plant. Pollen goes from one flower to another flower on the same plant. Now, from functional point of view, this looks like cross-pollination. Why? Because a pollinator needs to carry pollen from one flower to another. Bee or butterfly has to move between flowers. So functionally, it's cross-pollination. But genetically, this is where it gets interesting. Both the pollen and the ovule come from the same plant, same genetic individual. So genetically, it's like self-pollination, same genotype. The result? No real genetic mixing, no new combinations of alleles, limited genetic diversity. Basically, offspring have the same genetic makeup as the parent, not true cross-pollination genetically. Xenogamy or cross-pollination. Xeno means foreign or different. Pollination between different plants. Pollen from one plant, stigma from different plant. The key difference? Genetic diversity. The pollen comes from a different genetic individual. Completely different alleles? Possibly. Different genetic makeup. When different gametes combine, you get recombination. New combinations of alleles. Offspring have something new, not exact copy of either parent. Why is this important? Evolution. Genetic variation is the raw material for natural selection. Populations with variation can adapt to environment changes. Without variation, population gets stuck. Wind pollination is the most common abiotic pollination. Many plants use wind. Grasses, cereals, many trees. Wind is a reliable agent in many environments. For wind pollination, pollen must have specific properties. Lightweight, so air can carry it easily. Non-sticky because sticky pollen would clump and be heavy. Aerodynamic pollen? Basically, the flowers have exposed stamens. Stamens stick out. Why? So pollen can be easily caught by wind. Maximum exposure to air currents. The stigma, it's feathery. Brush-like, like a net basically. Catches pollen grains from air, large surface to capture more pollen. The flowers are clustered. Corn cobs have lots of flowers. Grass inflorescence dense. Many flowers together increases chance of wind-based pollen transfer between flowers. One ovule per flower. Why? Because there are many flowers. If each flower produces seed, total seed output is massive. No need for many ovules per flower. These flowers are not beautiful, not colorful, don't produce nectar. Why waste energy on attracting animals? Wind is the pollinator. Animals not needed. Water pollination quite rare in flowering plants. Only about 30 genera show this, mostly monocots. Not common at all. Two different types of water pollination exist. Surface type flowers at water surface. Submerged type, everything underwater. Different strategies. Take Vallisneria, a freshwater plant. Female flowers come up on long stalks, reach the water surface. Male flowers release pollen on the water surface. Pollen drifts with water currents, contacts female flowers. Zostera, seagrass. Everything is underwater. Female flowers below water, male flowers below water. Pollen released underwater carries through water to female flowers. The pollen is special, elongated, ribbon-like. Long shape helps in water transport. Different from spherical pollen in most plants. But here's a problem: water would normally damage pollen. How to protect? Mucilaginous coating. Slimy coating that repels water and keeps pollen protected. Like wind pollination, these flowers are not colorful. No nectar. Why? No animal pollinator involved. Pollen transport is passive, just drifting with currents. Now, animal pollination. Most important type in flowering plants. Insects are the main pollinators. Bees absolutely dominant, but also butterflies, flies, beetles, wasps, ants, moths, all kinds of insects. Not only insects, some flowers pollinated by birds, sunbirds, hummingbirds, even bats pollinate some flowers. Diverse pollinator group. Interesting thing, flowers are adapted for specific animals. Co-evolution happened, each flower evolved to attract particular pollinator. Specific pairing, sometimes. Insect-pollinated flowers are colorful. Red, blue, yellow, pink, all kinds of colors. Why? To be visible, to attract insects. Color is signal, come here, food available. Also fragrant, scent travels in air, attracts insects from far away. Before they even see flower, they smell it. Fragrance is advertisement. If flowers are small individually, they cluster together. Makes bigger visual impact, easier for insect to find and visit multiple flowers. Efficient pollination. Some flowers attract flies and beetles. How? Foul odors, putrid smells, rotting meat smell. These flowers mimic dead animals or feces. Attracts flies that lay eggs in dead things. What attracts insects? Rewards. Main rewards are nectar and pollen. Both are nutritious. Nectar is sugary, gives energy. Pollen is protein-rich, both valuable to insect. Nectar is produced in special structures called nectaries. It's sweet, sugary solution. Insects love it. They come to feed on nectar. Pollen itself is reward. Nutritious, protein-rich. Some insects come just to collect pollen, use it as food for themselves or for larvae. How does pollination happen? Insect feeds on nectar or pollen. While feeding, it touches anthers and stigma, gets coated with sticky pollen, then goes to next flower, pollen rubs on stigma. Transfer accomplished. Some flowers offer something different, safe place to lay eggs. Amorphophallus does this. Its very tall flower produces special microhabitat. Insect can lay eggs safely while pollinating. Yucca plant and a moth species, they have incredible relationship. Neither can survive without other. Moth lays eggs inside yucca flower ovary. While laying eggs, moth pollinating flower. Then seeds develop. Moth larvae feed on seeds. Beautiful mutualism. Self-pollination for many generations, bad thing generally. Why? Inbreeding depression. Offspring become homozygous for many genes. Bad recessive alleles express themselves. Fitness decreases. Viability decreases. Plants have evolved solutions, outbreeding devices, mechanisms to prevent self-pollination and push cross-pollination. Clever strategies? Really. First strategy, timing. Anthers release pollen early, before stigma is ready. Pollen ready, but stigma not receptive yet. So self-pollination impossible by timing alone. Reverse situation, stigma ready first, then anthers release pollen later. Stigma can't pollinate itself if no pollen yet. Timing prevents it again. Second strategy, positioning. Anthers here, stigma there, physical distance between them. Pollen released, can't reach stigma by gravity or simple contact. Positioned away from each other. Result? Self-pollination becomes practically impossible. Either timing prevents it or positioning prevents it. Cross-pollination becomes only option. Self-incompatibility, genetic mechanism. Hence, BIS still recognizes its own pollen and rejects it. Fancy system molecular recognition. How it works? Proteins on pollen surface, proteins on stigma surface. These proteins interact, chemical recognition happens. Pistil says, this is my own pollen. Reject it, what happens? Either pollen doesn't germinate on stigma blocked at first stage, or if it germinates, pollen tube can't grow. Blocked anyway, either way, self-pollen fails. Unisexual flowers, another strategy. Some plants produce separate male and female flowers. Monoecious, mono means one, ecious means house. One plant, two types of flowers. Castor plant monoecious. Female flowers and male flowers on same plant but different locations. Prevents autogamy. No stamens in female flower, but geitonogamy still possible. Bee can carry pollen between flowers. Dioici dio means two. Uacious means house. Two plants, one all male, one all female. Complete separation of sexes to different individuals. Papaya is dioecious. Some papaya trees are male, some are female. Complete separation. Impossible for self-pollination or geitonogamy. Must be cross-pollinated by pollinators carrying pollen between trees. The pistil is intelligent. Basically, it can recognize pollen. Right pollen? Accept. Wrong pollen? Reject. How? Chemical recognition system? It's like conversation between pollen and pistil. Chemical molecules talking. Back and forth communication. Is this the right pollen? Let me check. Continuous dialogue. Compatible pollen lands on stigma. What happens? Germinates. Pollen activates. The germ pore opens the weak spot in exine and germination begins. Pollen tube forms elongated structure, penetrates the stigma, grows through the style tissue. Navigating toward ovary, path to ovule. Contents of pollen move into tube, the cytoplasm, the generative cell or male gametes. Everything flows into the tube becomes the vehicle. If pollen was two-celled at shedding, generative cell divides in the tube, produces two male gametes. If three-celled, already has two gametes. Either way, tube carries gametes. The pollen tube reaches ovule, enters through micropyle. The micropyle is the gate, then enters one of synergids. Filiform apparatus guides entry, like landing lights for airplane. Pollen pistil interaction. That's the technical term for this whole process. From pollen landing on stigma to pollen tube entering the embryo sac. Whole sequence. Artificial hybridization technique in crop breeding. Goal: mix good traits from two plants into one hybrid. Plant A has trait 1, plant B has trait 2. Hybrid gets both traits. Powerful technique. Problem: in nature, pollination is random. Any pollen can reach stigma. Can't control which pollen fertilizes which ovule. For crop improvement, need control. Solution: two techniques, emasculation and bagging. These techniques give control. Guarantee only desired pollen reaches stigma. Emasculation: remove anthers. Using forceps, carefully pluck out anthers from the flower bud before they release pollen. Careful work, needs precision. Bagging: cover the emasculated flower with butter paper bag. Immediately after emasculation, this bag prevents stray pollen from reaching stigma. Protection barrier. Then wait. When stigma is ready, receptive, apply the desired pollen. Dust it on manually using brush or directly. Controlled application, specific pollen, specific amount. After pollination, put bag back on. Keep it bagged. Prevents any other pollen reaching stigma. Protects the controlled cross until fertilization complete. Female unisexual flowers? No stamens, so no emasculation needed. Just bag the unopened bud. Prevents any pollination until desired pollen applied. Simpler process. The pollen tube enters the synergid, releases two male gametes. These male gametes enter the cytoplasm of the synergid. Now they can interact with female cells. Syngamy first fusion event. One male gamete moves toward egg cell. Fuses with egg cell nucleus. Fusion of two nuclei happens. Result: zygote. Diploid has two sets of chromosomes. 2n. One set from father male gamete. One set from mother egg cell. Combined. The zygote is beginning, first cell of new sporophytic generation. It has DNA from both parents, genetic information from both. Diploid contains everything needed for embryo development. Meanwhile, the second male gamete is doing something different. It moves toward the central cell, toward the two polar nuclei inside the central cell. Triple fusion, that's the name, triple because three nuclei involved, two polar nuclei plus one male nucleus. All three fuse together at once. Result: primary endosperm nucleus, triploid nucleus, 3n. Three sets of chromosomes, two from polar nuclei from mother, one from father, male gamete. The central cell becomes primary endosperm cell Binsky. This cell will divide many times, form endosperm tissue, nutritive tissue feeding embryo. Double fertilization, that's unique feature. Two fusions happening simultaneously. Syngamy forms zygote. Triple fusion forms endosperm nucleus, both happening in same embryo sac, unique to flowering plants. Gymnosperms, no double fertilization, single fertilization only, no triple fusion. This innovation belongs to angiosperms alone, major evolutionary advantage. Endosperm develops first, before embryo develops significantly. Why? To prepare nutrition. Embryo will need food when it develops. Endosperm prepared beforehand. The primary endosperm cells plus CPAC, it divides many times. Repeated mitotic divisions, forms endosperm tissue. Lots of cells. First phase, free nuclear endosperm. Nuclei divide but no cell walls. Many nuclei floating in common cytoplasm. Free to move around, rapid division. Then cell walls form. Now nuclei are enclosed in cells. Cell walls separate the cells from each other. Cellular structure forms. Look at coconut, the liquid inside coconut water, that's free nuclear endosperm. The white solid part you eat, that's cellular endosperm. Same tissue, different stages. Nice visible example. The endosperm cells are packed with food. Starch, proteins, fats, energy reserves. Everything needed to feed growing embryo. Nutritive tissue, purely functional. Non-albuminous seeds or ex-albuminous, the endosperm, gone, completely consumed by the embryo during development. Embryo eats it up. What happens to the absorbed endosperm? Goes into the cotyledons. Cotyledons enlarge, fill up with stored food. Become storage organs themselves. Pea seeds, non-albuminous. Groundnut seeds, non-albuminous. Beans, non-albuminous. Big seeds with fat cotyledons. All that food in cotyledons. Albuminous seeds, opposite situation. Endosperm stays, doesn't get completely consumed, persists as separate tissue around the embryo. Castor seeds, albuminous. Coconut albuminous. Wheat grain albuminous. Rice grain albuminous. Maize kernel albuminous. Very common actually. In albuminous seeds, embryo is small, endosperm is large. Lots of food storage outside the embryo. When seed germinates, endosperm feeds the young seedling. Some seeds have perisperm, that's nucellus tissue that persists. Black pepper has it, beet has it. Another food storage source besides endosperm. Embryo development starts here, at the top of embryo sac, where the zygote is, near the filiform apparatus region. Development stages in sequence. Zygote divides, forms proembryo. Then globular stage round shape. Then heart-shaped looks like heart. Finally mature embryo with full structure. Dicot embryo has recognizable parts, an embryonal axis main structure, and two cotyledons seed leaves. That's the dicot signature. The axis has two parts. Upper part, epicotyl. Above the cotyledons. At top, the plumule stem tip, shoot apex. Future shoot comes from plumule. Lower part, hypocotyl. Below the cotyledons. At bottom, the radical root tip. Future root comes from radicle. The radicle is covered by root cap. Protective covering. Protects the delicate meristematic cells at root tip. When root grows into soil, cap protects from friction and damage. Monocot embryo different structure, one cotylid only. We call it scutellum and it sits to the side laterally, not above the axis like in dicots. Positioned sideways basically. The radical root tip, it's enclosed, not exposed. Covered by coleorhiza, that's a sheath. Undifferentiated tissue, protective covering, like a tube around the root. Coleorhiza protects the emerging root when seed germinates. Delicate root needs protection as it breaks through seed coat and soil. Above the scutellum, you have epicotyl. Inside, shoot apex meristem for shoot growth, and leaf primordia is developing. All this is enclosed in coleoptile. Coleoptile is hollow structure like sheath, protects the developing shoot and leaves inside. Folia structure made from leaf-like tissue. Why these modifications? Adaptation for germination. When monocot seed germinates, it has to push through soil. Coleoptile helps shoot push up, coleorhiza helps root push down. Specialized adaptations for successful emergence. Seed is mature ovule, result of sexual reproduction. Ovule has developed, seeds are ready. Seeds are the reproductive units, plants disperse. Seed coat outer layer, made from integuments of original ovule. Hardened, toughened, protective barrier, tough, resistant covering. Functions, protection. Mechanical protection from rough handling, prevents pathogens from entering, reduces water loss. Protective jacket, basically. The micropyle persists, that small opening. In seed coat, remains a small pore. Why? During germination, water and oxygen enter through micropyle, path for hydration and respiration. As seed matures, water is removed. Lot of water is lost. Seed dries out from 90% water to about 10 or 15%. Desiccation process. As water reduces, metabolic activity decreases. Seed enters quiescent state, slow metabolism, minimal activity, ready to wait. Dormancy state of inactivity. Embryo waits, doesn't germinate immediately, waits for right conditions, moisture, oxygen, temperature. When conditions favorable, dormancy breaks and germination starts. While seeds are developing inside, the ovary is also developing. Both processes happen together. Coordinated development, seeds ready, fruit ready. The ovary wall, it becomes pericarp. Pericarp is the fruit wall, the tissue surrounding the seeds inside fruit. Multiple layers, differentiated tissues. Fleshy fruits, these are juicy. Mango, orange, guava, succulent, full of moisture, attractive to animals. Animals eat them, disperse the seeds. Dry fruits opposite. Groundnut, mustard. Low moisture, hard. Dispersed through wind or water, mechanical ways. Not eaten by animals usually. The shape and structure of fruit depends on the original ovary. How many locules? Arrangement of placenta. These determine what fruit looks like finally. True fruits develop from ovary alone. Only ovary tissue involved. Most common type, examples, many berries, legumes, standard fruits, basically, pulse fruits, other floral parts involved in formation, thalamus, receptacle, calyx, what can contribute, not just ovary. Complex origin, apple false fruit, thalamus forms bulk of edible flesh, core contains true seeds. Pear, same thing, strawberry red fleshy part is thalamus, cashew, accessory structure besides true fruit. All false fruits. Parthenocarpic fruits, special type, develop without fertilization. No pollination needed. Result, seedless fruit. No seeds inside. Bananas are naturally parthenocarpic. Seedless bananas, no fertilization needed. Commercial bananas you eat, all seedless, no pollen involved. Parthenocarpy can be induced artificially. Apply gibberellin's growth hormone, triggers fruit development without pollination. Scientists can create seedless fruits artificially. Seeds have big advantages. First one, water independence. Pollination happens through air, no water needed, gametes don't swim. Massive advantage for land plants. Plants on land, not stuck in water. Second advantage, dispersal. Seeds can travel wind dispersal, water dispersal, animal dispersal. Many mechanisms can reach far places, colonize new habitats. Spreading ability, excellent. Third advantage, sarcode, storage. Seeds have stored food endosperm or cotyledons packed with energy. When seed germinates, seedling has ready food supply. Survival increased dramatically. Fourth advantage, protection. Seed coat is tough, resistant. Protects embryo from mechanical damage, environmental stress, diseases, like armor around precious contents. Fifth advantage, and most important evolutionarily, genetic diversity. Seeds result from sexual reproduction. Recombination creates new allele combinations. Genetic variation in population, variation fuels evolution, adaptation, long-term success. Apomixis, special mechanism. Seeds formed without fertilization. No pollination, no gamete fusion. Yet seeds still form. Clever adaptation. Apomixis is asexual, no genetic mixing, but looks sexual, produces seeds. Gets benefits of seeds dispersal, dormancy, germination, but also benefits of asexual genetic clones, immediate fitness. One mechanism, diploid egg. Egg develops without meiosis, stays diploid. No haploid egg develops into embryo without sperm fusion. Completely asexual. Another mechanism, nucellar membrane. Common in citrus and mango. Cells of nucellus start dividing, protrude into embryo sac, develop into complete embryos. Somatic tissue becomes embryo. Result? Clones. Apomictically produced embryos are genetically identical to parent. Exact genetic copy. No new gene combinations. Polyembryony, multiple embryos in one seed. Happens in citrus. One seed contains many embryos, some from apomixis, some from sexual reproduction sometimes. Multiple babies in one seed package. Hybrid varieties perform very well. Hybrid vigor heterosis. Increased productivity, stronger, more resistant to diseases. Better performance than pure breeding lines. But problem? Hybrids don't breed true. Plant hybrid seeds, offspring segregate. Different allele combinations lose the hybrid characteristics, no longer hybrid. Consequence, farmers must buy new seeds every year. Can't save seeds from this year's crop for next year. Economic burden for farmers, expensive system. Solution, apomixis. If hybrid plants made apomictic, seeds would be clones. No segregation. Offspring identical to parent hybrid, characteristics preserved year after year. Imagine farmers saving hybrid seeds year after year, planting them, same high yield again. No need to buy expensive seeds yearly, costs down, accessibility up. Revolutionary change for agriculture. Impact on agriculture? Massive. Farmers in developing countries get access to hybrid benefits without huge costs. Production costs reduced. Agricultural efficiency improved. Game changer, really. Let's recap the entire journey. Flowers have male parts stamens with anthers, female parts pistils, both in one flower, usually. Pollen develops in anthers through microsporogenesis. Each pollen 2 cells. Vegetative cell, generative cell, protected by 2-layered wall. Embryo sac develops in ovule. 7 cells, 8 nuclei. Egg apparatus at top, central cell in middle, antipodals at bottom. Organized structure. Pollination transfers pollen. Pollen-pistil interaction chemical dialogue. Right pollen accepted, wrong pollen rejected. Pollen tube grows to ovule. Double fertilization unique to angiosperms. 2 fusions. Male gamete and egg produce zygote. Second male gamete and polar nuclei produce endosperm nucleus, both in one embryo sac. Zygote develops into embryo through several stages. Dicots have 2 cotyledons, monocots have 1. Both have epicotyl and hypocotyl. Ovules mature into seeds with protective coat and stored food. Ovary transforms into fruit with pericarp. See ordinated development. Fruits classified by origin. True fruits most common. False fruits like apple involve thalamus. Parthenocarpic like banana produce no seeds. Apomixis special mechanism. Seeds without fertilization could revolutionize hybrid agriculture if applied properly. Overall significance: genetic diversity from sexual reproduction. Seeds enable spread and persistence. These mechanisms made flowering plants dominate Earth. Remarkable success story.
Me app and you study way. Uploaded textbook, get summaries in a flash. Practice exams, flashcards, make your knowledge last. AI power boost for every ambitious mind. All in seconds, leave the stress behind. In labs here, yeah, you know